Hey there gardeners, Chris here from Garden Steading today, and I wanted to take you through my 3 most expensive fruit trees, although one is a twofer, and basically give you a look at what I thought was most worthwhile to spend money on, at least for my particular circumstances. And these are a little bit on the exotic side, I would say, as much as being something that's quite unusual as far as being in the shops when we're talking about the fruit. And of course, I guess it's going to depend on what country you're from, but these are plants that I see talked about, especially the specific ones I've got, a lot less than even other variants. And I'm going to start off here with my persimmon. Now, we put 2 of these in, and these were a really big operation. Here, there used to be a small tree growing that we really didn't want in this location. We wanted a real feature tree, and we thought the persimmon would be a good tree for that. Keeping in mind it is deciduous, so you are going to lose the leaves over winter, and you're going to end up with quite an expensive stick, or eventually a very large tree with no leaves on it during those colder months. We're in the subtropics, so it's fairly warm here. However, it's not warm enough for it to keep its leaves. And one of the good things, I believe, is that they don't need really cold weather to be able to set fruit. And I bought these locally from a local seller, the Kendall fruit tree fella, who had them growing and actually let me try some of the fruit growing on his. This is a non-astringent version, so it does mean that you don't have to wait for it to be super ripe, otherwise it's disgusting. You've got a lot more options of when you eat it, when it's a little bit on the less ripe side, I guess you'd say. And I was blown away by how good that fruit was. I could not say no to buying 1, or in fact 2. Now, this particular one here, I've actually got to read the sticker because it's been a while since I put it in. It is the Ichi-ki-kei-jiro, and it is a grafted persimmon, so that's worth keeping in mind. Non-astringent, as I said. An astringent persimmon needs to be super ripe and really squishy to eat the fruit, and as a result this feels like an option that's probably going to appeal to more people. Maybe not the more traditional kind of gardener who wants the real old school persimmon, but for someone who's a little bit more interested in just kind of the output and the ease of growing, I reckon the non-astringent is probably the way to go. And yeah, as you can see here, we've put it in a nice big kind of raised mound, both so that it has good drainage. While I was told it doesn't need quite as good a drainage as avocados, which really hate wet feet, I did want to put really good soil around it because it's a really big investment. Now, these were just under $100, and it's worth keeping in mind that while that does seem like a bit of an investment, at the end of the day, it should be here if I keep it alive very long term. And I guess the other point I would also make is that we're getting fruit off it, which in the long term could easily pay for itself, even once it's quite established, perhaps paying for itself in a single season, which makes it very worthwhile. Now, would I consider buying a bare root tree? To be honest, here in Australia, I've looked, and maybe I've looked in the wrong places, but they're like $10 cheaper than just buying them in a pot or in a bag. And so really for me, there's not much of a saving there as far as, what you could do. Let's go have a look at our other persimmon over the other side of this same part of the garden, because as I said, these are going to be real feature trees. Okay, so here is my second tree. As you can see, this tree is actually quite a bit taller, maybe not double the height, but way taller. It's a bit more established. It did actually have some leaves on it when we bought it, but we bought it at the beginning of winter, I think it was. And so as a result, it was very much in that downward spiral to going deciduous and not looking so nice. And while that may not be the most exciting thing in the short term, we're heading into spring in a couple of weeks' time, and I'm really excited to see these bloom and see how they go in our garden. And so again, we've got a little seeding area over there that really desperately needs doing up, but this could be in the future a really beautiful part of the garden when this gets a bit more established, and the idea of being able to pick some fruit off it is really exciting. We went for a different variety, I'm pretty sure. And so this is the Fuyu. And so again, a non-astringent persimmon. I did think about getting one of the more traditional types, which was the astringent type. But at the end of the day, I just went with these because I felt like it was the safer choice for someone who's a little bit on the lazy side and a bit on the impatient side and who doesn't like waiting for things. Because I tell you what, I could definitely see myself picking the stuff too early and then being really disappointed. Now, most people have heard of the persimmon. However, I think this one might be a bit more of a surprise to people, which is the Jujube. And this is basically an Asian plant, very, very common in China. And that's why it's called the Chinese date, as one of its many names. And yeah, as you can see here, it is quite an ugly stick in the ground. I do think it's still alive. I've got my fingers crossed on that one. Again, what basically happened towards the end of autumn is I mulched it right up and I actually put some fertilizer on it, and anecdotally a lot of people said don't fertilize them, they don't really like it, they're just very self-sufficient, just get some good mulch around it and it'll be fine. And yeah, so basically I've got here my Chinese date. It's not looking particularly impressive, I will say, but it does look like it's alive. It's got some nasty spikes on it, so do keep that in mind depending on where you're putting it. And this is basically in one of the toughest, roughest, most harsh parts of the garden. It should get good sun in summer when it'll probably need it. During winter it's a little bit more shaded, but it's out in the open, and this area is quite dry and the ground is very, very rocky. So part of the reason I planted it here is because they're meant to be very, very hard to kill, almost weedy in their growth is something that a few people have said. And I'm really quite excited about this because I think I actually did eat some of these dates in China, and they were really, really cool, kind of unusual kind of thing, but also something that you can dry, you can do a lot of stuff with. And again, because it's the kind of plant which should be fairly hardy, especially once established, it's just perfect for an Australian garden or anywhere where you're thinking of that kind of really harsh conditions. We will have to see. Obviously, we're more in the subtropics, and I think these do well in even colder climates, and so that's something to keep in mind. But this, I think, was actually the most expensive plant I've bought. I think the sticker price was 110 on this. It might have even been more than that. And I've only really seen them once or twice ever, even from our local fruit tree guy, which is the fruit tree fella. And when he had them and I saw one, I went, I'm going to have to grab one of those because I'm not sure I'll get another chance, at least for a significant amount of time. Okay, so all of my expensive plants aren't just twigs in the ground, thankfully, as you can see here with my mulberry. Wait a minute, that's not the right mulberry. Okay, bit of a correction. My white Chatoot mulberry or white king mulberry is indeed just a stick. It is hidden behind this fence. This, I think, actually is a dwarf. Oh, spider. Oh, maybe not. No, that's a full size one. I think these only grow to 4 to 6 meters anyway, so they're not the biggest of plants, but the reason that this is special is actually because it is a white mulberry. So traditionally mulberries are black or pretty purple. This is a very different option. And again, we got this from the Kendall fruit tree fella, and part of the reason I bought it is because he had one growing. It was amazing. The fruit was beautiful. I'm not sure that I would say it's better fruit than a traditional mulberry. What really sets this apart is it's kind of like a vanilla-y mulberry. It's white. It won't stain, which is quite nice. And it's just a very, very different fruit. It's probably a bit more on the complex side of things as far as flavor. And it's just very different than a regular mulberry. So even if you have a regular mulberry, chucking one of these in the ground is probably going to be a pretty good idea too if you like something with a little bit of variety. I have been keeping an eye on it, and it's got one green shoot just here, but there are a lot of shoots that are probably going to burst into green growth anytime now. We're not quite out of winter, where the other mulberry that I just showed you is looking super healthy. It's looking really, really good. This is a particularly rough spot in the garden. It's probably not the best place for my white Chatoot. However, we're just going to work with that. And the reason it's here is because it's a nice prominent position. It won't grow too big, so it should work very, very well from a size perspective here. And I just wanted it really close to the house because I think that's going to be an advantage. But it is probably the least successful of our mulberries, and we have the white Chatoot here. I actually have a regular Chatoot or a dwarf red Chatoot. I don't know. I'd have to check the name on that one. But the other Shatoot actually kept leaves all through winter, so it was in a little bit of a more protected spot over there. I think it may have just lost its last couple of leaves, whereas this one here, it lost its leaves much, much earlier. Obviously didn't like the cold weather quite as much, but we're still very much in the region where something like this will grow very well. And so I'm really looking forward to this getting a bit more established and getting some crops out of it in the future. So there you go, my 4 most expensive fruit trees, which are currently just sticks in the ground. However, I am going to do an update in probably a month's time when we're well into spring, and hopefully these are all going to be covered in shoots or nice green growth and be shooting up. That's certainly the hope, and hopefully they've all made it through winter, but we'll have to see on that one. And I definitely recommend these if you can get them locally and they suit where you are living and where you're growing and your garden space, because I feel like they're a pretty interesting set of plants that are really going to add something to your garden. Okay, so it has been a good couple of weeks since I did that original bit of footage, and as you can see here, our Fuyu persimmon has come to life. Now, this has only really been looking good for the last week, and while it does have quite a bit of growth up the top here, this is a very, very tall tree with all of that growth right up the top, which, to be honest, I'm not sure that's really the best thing. It'd be nice to be getting a lot more laterals out down lower, but at the same time, I'm certainly not going to go and just chop the top off this at this stage. It's now in spring, it's now in bloom, or in shoot, I should say, and as a result, yeah, it's just not worth intervening. Perhaps what I should have done during winter is maybe chopped it off down low and encouraged some lower shoots, but that might just have to be something we do next winter. Once it's had a heap of time during spring and summer to put on the growth to really get its roots looking really good and expanded and everything like that, and just get a bit more established, and then we can think about doing that if that's a primary concern, which I do like keeping the fruit trees just that little bit more compact. However, the other thing to keep in mind is that this is actually in my wife's blossom garden, and as a result, she is planting a lot of things down low. Now, most of the sun direction is going to be from kind of over there, and so as a result, if we do allow this to grow tall, it's not going to have much of an impact on anything around it. We can plant out under it perhaps. However, our fruit forest is over that way, and if we did let it grow big enough, it could eventually become a problem. With that being said, we've got some big trees up there anyway, so it's probably not going to be an issue if we do allow it to go tall, apart from really struggling to get the fruit off, which, you know, is always probably the primary concern when you do that. Okay, so again, it's been a couple of weeks, but as you can see here, this is looking amazing. And again, this is our Jiro, our Ichi-ki-kei-jiro. I should have remembered that from last time, but I haven't. And it is looking amazing. It has grown out really, really well. I do think there is a growth down under the graft I'm gonna have to get rid of. But overall, this is what we wanna see. And certainly, this was the tree that I wasn't so worried about, if I'm really brutally honest, out of the 2 of the persimmons anyway. Really good result. It's a nice kind of size and shape at this early stage, and we're just going to let it go and see how it goes, because again, quite an expensive plant, but definitely one which is already showing really, really good results. And I just need to make sure I keep the mulch and the moisture up around the base of the tree, and I think we'll be awesome. Okay, so this is our white Shatoot mulberry, and in comparison to when we last talked about it, it is looking awesome. And the main reason it's looking so good is because basically there is a significantly larger amount of fruit than there is actual foliage on this tree. I do have a really big protector that goes around this tree to keep the pests out, because I do not doubt the wallabies would absolutely love to get their little paws on this. And basically at this early stage, I could not be happier with the white Shatoot mulberry. The regular Shatoot mulberry we've got is actually looking good as well. This was a little bit of a slow starter, and that's by no means a criticism, but it looks like we're going to be getting a crop quite soon once these berries ripen up. And the big advantage I've been told is because they're a white fruit, they're not nearly as targeted by birds and things like that. So we're hoping that's true. I'm just looking at it now just to see whether I can spot any grubs or anything like that on the tree, but it's looking really, really good. I just need to get the fence back around it. And again, this is a real success story, I would say, not just because the tree is looking quite healthy, although it's quite bowed and low, but because we're just seeing so much fruit on it. And this is hopefully a bit of a sign of what's to come. I did mound around this tree really, really heavily to try and give it some really good soil, and I feel like that has been successful. So yeah, overall, really good success story here. And I'm hoping there'll be a little bit of an update when we try some of this fruit in the near future, or these berries in the near future. So when I was previously at my Jujube tree, you may have noticed a little bit of worry in my mind over, and in the tone of my voice probably more noticeably, in that I was really worried that I'd killed this. And there were two reasons for that. Number one, when I looked online, people said don't fertilize them. They really dislike it and it can be a real problem. And basically this dropped all its leaves after I fertilized it, along with all of the citrus that we have down this section of the garden. And I did check and it said no, they're obviously a tree that loses their leaves. It's a deciduous tree, which I wasn't even aware of, but does make sense because these are obviously from Asia and I think China, so it gets colder there. However, at the time I was kind of looking at it thinking to myself, this is looking like a real dead twig. And not that it's the only thing that was looking that way. It's just such a rough spot in the garden here that it was probably the biggest concern I had, partially because it was so expensive and partially because it was just, you know, in such a harsh spot. So if things were going to go wrong, it was probably to this plant here. I'm just going to watch this big horsefly that's flying around me. If that bites me, it is going to hurt. Anyway, it's now covered in new blooms. It's looking really, really good heading into spring. And so I'm really happy because I think this actually is the most expensive of all the plants. It's either this or the Shatoot that I bought. Both of these were real pricey, but it's all paying off now because this is looking amazing. Obviously it's not in as much shoot as the other plants, but it is looking really, really healthy with green shoots all over it. So a definite win there. I'm really excited to see how it goes through spring and summer.